give her the treatment because we can get her back out into
I
society.
think it
that
was
kind of
Tim
thing.
who talked about branding her.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into that for test purposes. But the idea is that these were examples of these four populist articles. And, you know, that's actually a pretty big part of this chapter. Feminism, if you remember, is pretty much a straightforward definition. And I believe I asked a number of males and a few females in both classes, and there was really not a good definition that was given when you look back on this. Feminism in its most basic sense is?
Equality.
Basically equal treatment between the genders. And when you go back and you look at the articles that were dealing with feminism, we had the gender politics of basketball. This was Obama having that game with all male staffers. And give me some examples in there of why this is anti-feminist, quite frankly, because that's the controversy. Some folks would also begin to argue in there that when you think about it, everything else that he's done outweighs this basketball game because it's just a basketball game. We also had Obama as the closet sexist, and do you remember what that one dealt with?
Yeah, where he called the Attorney General also one of the best looking.
Yeah, and there was some debate on this in both classes. There's a sense out there that if I'm a professional woman and I've really done a good job with my qualifications, then you should not judge me based on how it is that I look. That's actually very demeaning, and that's very discriminatory. There are others out there that are saying, why should a man not be able to tell somebody that she's attractive, or for that matter, why should a woman not be able to say that a man is attractive? Why is that such a big
And
issue?
it also spoke about context.
And we did speak a little bit about context in both classes. There were the Inez articles up here, and there's 3 of them. So when you look at this, feminism and populism are actually a big part of this chapter. But Inez was the woman that went to see the Jets, and all hell broke loose with her attire. And that also dealt with, if you'll remember, a number of different issues as far as judging a book by its cover. Should a woman dress the part? Was she asking for it, as you might would argue, which in fact a number of the males had suggested. Not in class, but a number of the males had suggested in the article, and in fact a number of the females in the morning class did as well. But as you look at these actually were some of the better articles when you think about it. And to kind of delve into the links here a little bit.
So those articles are probably like definitely going to show up on the test.
It's going to be hard for him not to. Going to be hard for him not to. If you remember, and you'll notice up here, you'll notice up here Clinton Portis with the quote that he said, it's going to be hard for a woman to walk into a locker room with 53 men's packages and not find one that she likes. If you remember the Corona commercial where they actually threw the footballs, and to be honest with you, that was a part of what happened to Inez that day. You'll notice up here Rick Santelli, this was earlier, but Rick Santelli is another big piece that has come up several times. And then, of course, Newton child labor. Tomorrow's class, Tuesday morning, we're going to get into this idea of Eurosap. The night class last week had Eurosap. So, I mean, it's going to be difficult when you start talking about political culture or nationalism, which is also part of this chapter. And you'll understand this tomorrow when we deal with it, but Eurosap, Mr. Jap.
And also the death one for Death for Education.
Yeah, don't worry about that, because we didn't show it in class. I'm not going to hold you responsible for it, but if you watch it and you can use it, it's sure going to help.
So we can put it on there?
Yeah, so you can put it on there, yes. Nationalism, if you remember, was the biggest winner according to the chapter.
Yeah.
That's the one, religious nationalism, ethnic nationalism, I mean, however you want to look at it, but that exaggerated sense of self, and there were a number of really good quotes that were in there. So keep that in mind regarding the nationalism quotes. And that basically deals with ideology. The chapter 7 with political culture, pretty straightforward as you look at this. And I want to make sure that we hit the articles on this. But a couple of things. Political culture and public opinion were straight definitions. One being more lasting, which is political culture. One being more apt to change based on issues, which was public opinion. I think y'all should remember sleeping dogs. The old phrase, the American public are like sleeping dogs and you're supposed to let the sleeping dogs lie. That dealt with voting. How can you argue that the United States is the most democratic country in the world?
Although we don't vote on every issue, because we vote on the things that are most important to us, we get more riled up about them, again relating to the sleeping dogs.
I thought it had more to do with the fact that we have government at every level of life.
Yeah.
And so there is sort of democratic voting going on in the microcosm and the macrocosm.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Because you're saying so that everyone at a certain point has a say, I guess.
The most democratic country as the United States basically means that we have more elections than
No, that's
anybody
what I
else in
meant.
the world. Yeah, that's what you meant, okay.
No, that's not saying
That's not the way it came out.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, what the hell did she just say? Okay, we have more elections than anybody else in the world. Do you remember what percentage or what number, what rank we were in terms of percentage compared to the other countries in the world? Do you all remember that? That was actually a very, very quickie article, and it was in the political culture one, and it was dealing with voting ranking. And the United States was 138th, if you look at this.
Oh, in terms of the percent of people who actually vote?
What's that?
Is that that was in terms of the people who actually vote?
This is talking about the voter turnout.
Yeah.
And if you notice on here, we're 138th out of 169, so it's actually very, very average in fact at best. So you can argue that we are very democratic, and you could also argue that that's a big sham in fact too, so you can go with both. That quote that I had mentioned earlier was actually from page 124, and it's talking about culture wars in here, and talking about red states and blue states. It says, and this is the first full indented paragraph on 124, looks like 4 lines in. It says, now America seems to be 2 countries. One is conservative, evangelical, small town, and living in the middle of the country. It votes Republican, the red states on news maps. The other is liberal, secular, urban, and living on both coasts. It votes Democrat, the blue states. Conservatives hate gay and women's rights, taxes, and Bill Clinton, example Fox News. Liberals hate big corporations, the Iraq War, and George Bush, example Michael Moore. As you look at this, and like I said, I mean, for the short answers, I'm going to give you a mix of 5 and 10 pointers. And I'm probably going to give you a mix, and it'll probably be answer 35 or 40 out of a possible 60 short answer points. Some of them will be 5-pointers, some of them will be 10. And in virtually every chapter, we've had something to do with liberal and conservative. So there's got to be something in there about liberal and conservative, and you can pull from a lot of places. This is another really good one. It deals specifically with red and blue states, but it's pretty straightforward there. The 3 big terms, culture, opinion, and then the other one up here is going to be political socialization. And make sure that you're comfortable with those differences. Both classes at this point now have gone through the examples. The idea that family is the most important. And if you remember the article that I had given you, it was the one that was dealing with Obamacare, reaching out to the mothers, and there was something that was a little condescending. You know, you could use that article, in fact, if you were going to write about feminism, probably. Because there's something in there that could be very pro, there's something that could be very anti. And see, what's nice as you go through these articles is that in their own right, in a 5-point question, they should be fairly easy to explain. But if I give you a 10-pointer or maybe even a 15-pointer, you can pull articles from all 3 chapters to be able to answer that question. So keep that in mind. Yes?
Would you mind quickly just going over the difference definition of political culture, opinion, and socialization?
Political culture actually came from the very beginning of this chapter, and I had read this off in all of the classes. And I'll go ahead and mention this again. It says here, and this is right under what is political culture on page 119. Each society imparts its norms and values to its people who have distinct notions about how the political system is supposed to work and about what the government may do to and for them. These beliefs, symbols, and values about the political system are the political culture of a nation. So when you think about it, beliefs, symbols, and values. A nice belief, for example, might be equality. The idea that everybody should be treated the same by government. Beliefs, when you think about it. Values, when you think about it. The First Amendment, the idea of Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech or freedom of religion, these kinds of things. And then going further, the symbols, things like the Constitution itself, or the Statue of Liberty, or the American flag, which we spoke about in both classes dealing with the anthems. All of these would be examples. Culture is something that's lasting. Public opinion is like the issue of the day. You know, you could be somebody that is a Democrat, but today's issue might be pro-life. Tomorrow's issue might be welfare. And then yesterday's issue, when you think about it, might be equality or feminism. So when you think about it, the issue, how you believe is still the same, but the issue changes. And that's the trick with public opinion. We're dealing more with specific issues. And then socialization is not what you believe, but it is how you learn to believe what you believed. That's what we're talking about there. And if you remember on this, family is according to the chapter number 1, but then we also got into school, we also got into peers, we also got into government, or we will in tomorrow's class. And tomorrow's class we're going to get into cartoons.
When you, that was when I was sick, was that also media and everything was discussed or not?
I'm sorry, the what?
Media.
The media was not discussed yet, and we're going to get into that in your class a little bit tomorrow. But when you look at these articles, to give you an idea on these, we dealt with the anthem. And the anthem is a good example of a political culture type of an issue. It's also a really good example of how school socializes you. And if you remember with the anthem article, we were dealing with the Spanish version, the English version. I gave you the clip. I believe, did both classes see Roseanne sing it, or just one?
Yeah.
We saw that.
Did y'all not see Roseanne? I'll add that link so you can take a look at it. But some people would argue Roseanne set the anthem back. She set the anthem back 20 to maybe 2 centuries, in fact, with what she did. But of course, you saw the Spanish one, and a lot of people really did not like the Spanish version, including Spanish-speaking folks, which was ironic, I thought,
Okay.
in the classes. But the anthem article is a good one. When you think about it, the Castle Doctrine is a good one. And the Castle Doctrine is the one, if you remember, the idea of whether or not you should be able to shoot someone if in fact you're defending your home, you're defending your life, you're defending your property kind of a thing. And this was the article that dealt with Bryce Harper and the idea that this man was having an affair with another man's wife. The person that was the husband basically began to come after him. In his own garage, he ultimately shot and killed him, and he was not charged with anything. And there's a lot of debate as far as guns. Go ahead.
Are you saying that that goes under political culture opinion or social?
That's going to go under political culture. And when we had dealt with this issue, when we had dealt with this issue in the chapter, we had actually dealt with this as an issue. And you notice up here, guns is really one of the first ones. Guns.
So did you discuss guns last week?
We did talk about.
So that's what
We did talk about. I think we just talked about the Castle Doctrine last week
Yeah, we spoke
in the morning
about-
class. But for y'all, it was a couple of weeks ago.
Can't Castle Doctrine, though, be applied to both political culture and opinion? Because
It
it
could
does tend
be,
to
and
change
I won't
back and
ask you
forth.
to do that, but I am going to ask you to be able to explain the facts of that case if that's the question that I would give you. And if you want to, relate it to political culture or public opinion somehow, maybe that's fine, but make sure that you can give me the facts of that particular case. And if you remember, there were people that argued that he was way out of line for having shot that man. There were others who argued, you know what, I don't have time to figure out if somebody's armed, I don't have time to figure out how drunk they are, I need to defend myself rather than waiting. And Montana, as the state, had something to do with this. If you think back to it, and getting back into the articles here, you'll notice Chick-fil-A. We had a series of articles that actually dealt in a number of instances with commercial decisions. We had the Walmart one where we were kind of predicting, where we basically made the point that you can predict somebody's political affiliation based on where they shopped.
On the Chick-fil-A and the Walmart, can you expand a little, because that was when I was sick. So
Yeah, the Walmart article basically says that you can predict someone's political affiliation based on where they shop.
But was it more than
So I had given you, or the article had given you several stores. If you shop primarily at Walmart, what are you likely to be?
Republican?
Republican. If you shop primarily at Target, what are you primarily going to be?
Republican.
Republican. If you shopped at Bloomingdale's, what are you primarily going to be?
Democrat.
Democrat. And this goes back to that quote from page 124 talking about rural versus urban. Because the idea is that although some of the wealthier stores were primarily Democratic stores, they were only found in big cities, whereas JCPenney's or Walmart's or Target's or Sears are typically found in smaller towns, and smaller towns are going to be more red state, more Republican. We had dealt with this idea of Chick-fil-A, and what was the message that you were sending, at least according to this article, if you ate a chicken sandwich at Chick-fil-A?
That you're anti-gay?
That you're anti-gay. And the idea, again, with this one is very simply this debate that where you shop actually predicts a little something about you. And there was a sense out there that, wait, this is just a chicken sandwich. I'm not sending any political message. But in the morning class, I had asked, Michael, I believe it was you. I had used you as an example of being in the Klan.
Yeah.
And I had used you as the example. This was when we were downstairs, and I said, well, if Michael's a member of the Klan, are you going to hang around with him? Or doesn't it stand to reason that he's going to have certain values because he's a member of the Klan? And when you think about it, it's the same argument if you're gonna go eat at Chick-fil-A. And make note in there